Sometimes I've been called and told by the producers or people that, oh, we're bringing you in because we want that female gaze and the lens. The writer is the first technical person in that sense to be hired for the job, and she's or he's the one who's putting together the roadmap for you, and is the first person who's thrown out of the system as unceremoniously as one can imagine. We're still far from coming to a place where there are equal number of men as much as women, and mm, whoever identifies as men or women or other gender. So there's a long this just in terms of inclusivity, we still have a long way to go.
Hello and welcome to Outlook Talks. I'm Apeksha, and today we are going to be talking to Anu Singh Choudhary, who is one of the screenwriters in the Hindi film industry. Her latest film, Mrs. is out and has received a lot of critical appreciation. Anu has donned many professional hats, including that of a journalist, a writer, a documentary filmmaker, and now a screenwriter. So welcome, Anu, to Outlook Talks.
Thank you, Apeksha. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So, Anu, can you tell us a little bit about your long and colorful journey from being a journalist to a writer to now a screenwriter as well?
I call myself an opportunist. I have just gone ahead and grabbed every opportunity that came my way. Writing is the only thing that I have really enjoyed and have loved. I mean, creativity. I mean, putting something together. That's where my training has been. I have been trained. I was trained as a journalist, so that naturally led me to being a TV journalist, which was the year 2001, 2002, which is also the year when all these satellite channels were coming up. So there's so many opportunities which were available for the young lot like us. So I just went ahead and grabbed that opportunity and started working in one of the leading media organizations. Then came motherhood, which taught flexibility in whatever I did, which meant that I had to step back and look at my career in a very different manner. And yet do things that I was good at, use some of my skill sets, storytelling and writing to begin with, and also add to that a little bit of background from TV production. So that's how I became a documentary filmmaker for many years. While I was a documentary filmmaker, I was also a freelance journalist, and I also started to realize that truth often came in the form of stories, in the form of fiction. In fact, you were closer to truth or the truths that you were seeking when they were told in the form of fiction. So that led me to on a quest of like looking for a lot of answers through these fictional characters, even though they came from real life. And that's how I became a fiction writer and started write for radio, and I started to write in prose as a medium. Hindi is my primary medium. I've always largely written in Hindi, so that's where that's how I became an author. I was a translator again purely because I was at home. I wanted flexibility. I wanted career opportunities. I wanted to explore, and I love languages. Hindi and English are the two languages that one has grown up with. We are all bilingual, or sometimes multilingual in the country that we are in. So it was only natural that I started to use that part of me, and then I started to translate a lot of books, edit, became a publisher, and then eventually screenwriting. I have a very funny story to tell actually. And this, my kids were in a boarding school, and I was actually going to drop them to the boarding school, which is on the hills. And we were driving through a very rainy day and a very slippery road, and a boulder came crashing on the car, and we almost, I mean, it was crazy. We just somehow managed to, it's a miracle that we were saved, not a scratch to anybody. While I had my entire family in the car, my children, who are the most precious things, beings for me. And yet the first thought that came to my mind was, I would have died without writing a film. And that was a defining moment in that sense. I was like, if screenwriter is what I wanted to be at some point in my life, and I wanted to explore films as a medium, what is stopping me from doing that? Is that my age just because I'm 38, 39, I can't do? And that's how I, came to Mumbai and started to look for opportunities. Thankfully, again, at a time when opportunities were in abundance because OTT was just about coming up. They were looking for female writers because suddenly there was this whole need of tapping into the female audience, which is large and has largely been tapped by television, but never by films or OTT. And so that's how I landed up with an Arya and a Grehan, which happened simultaneously. And that's how I became a screenwriter.
That's sounds like an adventurous journey, Anu. So let's talk about Mrs. I mean, it has really managed to divide the audiences. And while a large section has been appreciative and many have identified with Richa's struggles, there are some men rights activists who claimed that the men in the film have been unduly vilified. Did you foresee such a reaction, or what are your thoughts about these kinds of claims?
I actually, to be honest, did I foresee it? No, because when you're writing, you're not writing it with a foresight of what it will do. All of us who were part of this film knew that an adaptation of a masterpiece, which is Great Indian Kitchen, would generate some kind of a controversy and conversations because we were wanting to make it accessible. We wanted to take it to a larger audience. That was the purpose. And we also wanted to make it look like it was a story of our own homes. Great Indian Kitchen, while is a great film, let's admit it was told through Geo Baby's, perspective, who himself is a man, and not to take away anything. I mean, it's one of the most compassionate pieces of films that pieces of writing, and he's a master storyteller. He's a great filmmaker, and to take it from there and then make it your own, because then you're bringing it your own lived experiences and lived experiences of a lot of women. We were acutely aware of the responsibility that was ahead of us, which was to be able to never be lose that balance of what is just and what is not. And there are microaggressions that happen within a familial system all the time. Like there is constant gender divide that's happening, and we are always like sort of those microaggressions always are brushed under the carpet. So how do you bring that in a way where it feels real? So here is the thing: these men are not vilified. They themselves don't know what they're doing. They're not aware. They have had no exposure. They're doing exactly what Richa's mother-in-law is doing, or Richa's mother for that matter is doing. The women are as much flag bearers of the patriarchy or the kind of gender imbalance or the kind of roles that have been defined to them, as much as these men are the vehicles or, in that sense, victim of that. So they're only behaving or they're only coming from their space of conditioning where it is, of course, considered very normal to be entitled. So entitlement doesn't come with any form of, oh, this is not supposed to be mine, because it has never been challenged. So therefore, if it is challenged, there will be obviously some sort of resistance, and it's a very natural thing. You've put some force, you've challenged a status quo, and the status quo, which has been comfortable for a large sections of society, which is also powerful in that sense, which has always had the upper hand, will feel threatened, and it is only natural. But does that mean that it should not be done? Does that mean that more films like Mrs. should not come? Does that mean that a Richa should not really take up the challenge of doing what she does? I don't think so. In fact, as much as there is this whole resistance coming from men's rights organizations and a lot of anger coming from them, there's a larger section of men who are also accepting of it, who are also saying that, oh, this should have, I mean, they're queasy and they're uneasy and they're also like, reacting, and they're saying that we didn't know this. Of course, there's this whole question of, oh, तुम्हारे साथ तो नहीं होता है ना? We live in nuclear families now, so तुम्हारे साथ नहीं होता है. But to also understand this is one generation. I mean, if we have the privilege of not being in that situation, it was only a generation ago that our mothers were going through that. So if that kind of imbalance doesn't bother you, or if that seems like a normal, or you think that it should not be challenged, then there is clearly some problem in the evolution that we should have had as a generation. We are in the 25th year of the 21st century. And if we have, if we have had social media and all forms of expression and access to knowledge and so much, like on all the matrix of what is known as a developed society, we've really improved, say, in something as fundamental as infant mortality rate or maternity mortality rate. What's happening to the basic human rights that should have been given to the women within the kitchen? We've not been able to democratize kitchen. Is it not time that we ask that? So, to answer your question, does it bother me, or was I anticipating that? It doesn't bother me. In fact, it makes me very, very grateful and happy that these questions are being raised and these debates are happening, and there's so much conversation that's happening around us. Does it make me uncomfortable to some extent? Because then it means that we haven't done enough, we haven't said enough stories. This should have been the normal.
So, you've leaned towards writing women-centric stories in your journey. There's a large part of my next question, which you've actually spoken about, but still, what is feminism in your understanding?
equal rights, like human rights. Feminism is humanism, as simple as that. Equal respect, opportunities, parity, equity. That's all. That is feminism to me.
And do you think there any kinds of hurdles that you faced in the industry because of your gender?
Yes and no. I'll start from no because I actually did come at a time when there were where actually being a woman was an advantage in the sense that I at least felt that I came with a lot of life experiences and at a time when the industry needed women's stories. So I have actually been given a lot of opportunities just because I laugh at the fact that sometimes I've been called and told by the producers or people that, oh, we're bringing you in because we want that female gaze and the lens. I mean, some initially I used to get very offended that, hello, I can write like all kinds of characters, male characters too, and I'm a writer. I'm not just a woman writer. I'm a writer. My job is to write. But now I don't take so much offense. I'm like, okay, let's use this to our advantage. What can I bring to the table, which is different and which a lot of my male colleagues who are actually, by the way, I've had the best colleagues possible in terms of directors that and co-writers that I've worked with. So and they're very respectful of the fact that my life experience is very different from theirs, and therefore I will be able to contribute better. And there is this openness to ask, to seek, and that I think is a big change that has happened to the industry in the last few years. I say yes because yes, I will still say that there has been some sort of challenge that one has faced only because of the fact that there are a lot of things that as women we can't do. And I'll begin from something as fundamental as networking at a place where you're not comfortable, not working with people you're not comfortable with, saying no to situations which are not pleasant or which do not align with your core values or which are not respectful. Um, and just in terms of, even though there's a very strong women network also in the industry, but uh, there is also this whole, this men's club, which is very integral. I mean, it has been a male dominated industry. If you look at the data, writers, by the way, in terms of like gender contribution, uh, their writers are 15, so 15% writers are women. But if you look at other technicians, actually so you will not find probably 4 or 5% DOPs, probably 8 to 10% editors. So we are far from coming close to say a 30% also. Even though there's so many writers out there now, women writers out there now, or directors even. So technicians, we're still far from coming to a place where there are equal number of men as much as women, and mm, whoever identifies as men or women or other gender. So there's a long this just in terms of inclusivity, we still have a long way to go. Um, and yet, if you look back, you feel that if we've managed to come here in the next decade or so, it'll get better. So I'm very hopeful.
So Mrs. has been an adaptation of The Great Indian Kitchen and Arya of the series Spinoza. What are the challenges of adapting stories across languages and cultures?
The first challenge is its success or and beyond. That's the first thing. That it these are all already successful, very very successful material. Therefore, they're being adapted or are being remade or are finding other languages and other cultures to be able to take it to another kind of audience. So that's a burden of it. You have to therefore stay true to the core of the story. However, you also have to add a lot of your own originality to it in a way where it begins to look different and is still as appealing as the original one. It's a fine line that you're constantly like sort of juggling. You're really walking a tightrope where you're constantly leaning on to the original material to see that you're not going away too much from the original material, because you have to stay true to the original material. And yet, culturally, when you're contextualizing, when you're finding new characters, when you're defining the voices of the characters, where you're looking at situations like scenarios, scenes that happen in the show or the film, you're trying to imagine it in a way which is relevant, far more relevant. So um, being true to the original material and yet being very, very original is the biggest challenge that anybody who's adapting goes through. And the second thing is also sometimes it feels like you're always comparing yourself to the original material, and you're always trying to up your game, which can feel like a burden. My coping mechanism has been that after a point I completely let the original material go, which is what I think a lot of directors also that I've worked with, including Ram, who's been the showrunner and the director and the creator of Arya, and Aarti Kada, who's directed Written in Kitchen. They also came from that school of thought where we like really imbibed the original material and then we let it be. We kept it aside and never went back to it, and then created our whole world. While keeping the tenets of the original intact. So first we would identify the tenets that these are the non-negotiables, and then we would find our way around it. And as a writer, my job was to make sure that that amalgamation was organic, so organic that it felt like a completely new world and new story and new characters, and you didn't feel like you were seeing the same thing.
And which of the two is more challenging, original writing or adaptation?
They're both very difficult and they're both very challenging, to be honest. Writing is not easy in any form. You are constantly, I mean, you've been a writer, you would know that every time you're staring at a white screen, blank screen,
Yeah.
you don't know where to begin from, and everything that you write just seems like a piece of trash. So you constantly, um, the original is challenging because then you constantly have to innovate and keep coming up with new ideas and new situations and new characters, and you really have to be original all the time. Adaptation, you have to be original very differently because you can't be the same. Your scene has to be very different from and yet be the same. You still have to meet those milestones in the from the original and yet do it differently. So I would really think they're both equally challenging and yet equally gratifying. And I'm very grateful that I've managed to do both.
So what are the kinds of similarities and differences that you felt between writing as a literary activity, because you've also been a writer, and writing for cinema?
The fundamental difference is that when you're writing for cinema, your job is to create a roadmap, not just for yourself, but for 500 people who will access that roadmap, who will put together that project. It's very collaborative. You're still stripped, even though you're writing and you're the first one to put that roadmap together. It is really your brainchild, but that brainchild is completely taken away from you. You therefore have to write in a way where it is accessible to everybody. So you have to be succinct, you have to be, brevity is the key word, like in screenwriting. Whereas literary writing or prose writing allows you so much more freedom as a writer, as with language, with metaphors, with phrases, with uh, just in terms of references that you want to use of readers, of people people who've influenced you, or books that have influenced you. There's so much constant um, sort of inspirations that we're constantly drawing in our prose writing, and we're doing that, and more so from life than from anything else. Film doesn't allow you that. You only have 80 pages, 90 pages of script to really just stick to, and you cannot choose to be. You can't indulge. There is no scope of uh, showing the flair of your language. It has to come in a dialogue. It has to come really briefly. Your screenplays even have to be even more succinct, because you have to give space for the director to think. You have to give it to the actor for her to be able to imbibe it completely and make her own. And therefore, you write some and you keep some um, to yourself for the actor to, or director or other people to interpret it differently. So it's so different and it's so exciting.
So you've done so many kinds of professional hats. Which
My
one do you
God, it
think?
feels like, oh my God, what am I like? My most unstable person, unstable professional.
Yeah. No, but still, even if you think it's been unstable, but the thing is that you've had that many experiences, that many kinds of experiences, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Which one do you think has really pushed you into absolutely uncharted territories, and it's been like a real challenge, or was the journey organic, like from being a journalist to coming here?
Well, actually, most of it felt organic. The one journey which is yet to be shown to the world in that sense, which completely threw me into unknown waters, and I really felt like I was gasping for breath, was when I decided to become a director, a producer director. So while it's a natural progression for a screenwriter to become a director, because you know your material so well that you can visualize it, and then you can begin to sort of also think that how do you want to see it, visualize it on screen. So it should have been a natural progression, and yet when I decided to just do a short film, I've directed before. I've directed documentaries and I've also directed a short web series long time ago. But when I decided to direct a short film, or now when I want to direct, say, a feature film, it's a completely different medium. Even though as a screenwriter, you know that medium in that sense. You know, you understand a lot about camera, you understand a lot about editing, because you know that okay, on paper how you're writing and how it has been performed or how it has been put together and how it will eventually be edited. You know, there is a journey to it, and you understand those steps, at least theoretically, so those steps of that journey. And yet when I chose to become a director, I didn't know what I was grappling with. I was like, I was at my wits' end. Everything was new. You didn't know the camera angles. There were so many technical details that we didn't, I mean, I was not aware of. I didn't know where to put this lamp to, have the face against the light and not against in shadow. So, and performances, you presume because in your head you were writing those dialogues and you're playing it and you're playing those characters. But when you have to direct the actors and cull out performances from them, it's a different ball game altogether. It's a different skill set. So that's when I have felt like, ah, this requires a lot more work and a lot more education and a lot more diligence.
And do you think that, I mean, there's been a transformation in terms of opportunities, in terms of storytelling, ever since the OTT boom happened. But do you think that previously, before the OTT boom, do you think it was more difficult to be a woman screenwriter, and it's slightly a better scenario now that you have this option?
It was difficult to be a writer, a screenwriter, man, woman, notwithstanding. Writing, finding jobs as writer is very difficult. Um, Unfortunately for a writer, everybody thinks they're writers. Every person worth his or her salt who knows anything about filmmaking, even not to diminish the position of, say, a spot dada or a light assistant. These are very integral part of the filmmaking process. But in their hearts of heart, they're also writers. They think they can also write what is being. So, as a writer, you're the first person to receive any criticism, and you're the first person to be trashed. So it's not easy to be a writer. The opportunities, of course, were far and few between, especially before the OTT. TV used to be a great opportunity for a lot of writers, which actually became a great source of livelihood for people who were wanting to make writing their careers. Films did not have those many opportunities. There were only this much space at the top of the pyramid, so it became more and more competitive. Unfortunately for OTT, the boom that it was, the debacle also happened as quickly. Like the exponential growth was actually really directly proportional to the downfall that we're now seeing. The budgets have been slashed. OTT is more and more looking like TV, or what is known as TV plus plus now. So we are back to where we had started from 5 years, 6 years ago. So it's going to be even more difficult just in terms of opportunities, and it's going to be more and more challenging, more so for women writers, because like I said, there are so many things that you can't compromise on. I mean, I know of a lot of women writers who are so discerning and so talented, but just as a matter of principle, they will not write about certain things ideologically. So that makes it more difficult.
This kind of leads me to the next question. which is that in recent times there's been a lot of talk around the precarious working conditions of screenwriters in Bollywood. And a lot of your fellow screenwriters have complained about not getting their dues financially or artistically. What are your
I was
thoughts?
also one of them.
Yes.
Yes, we've all spoken about it. The seventh Screenwriters Conference just happened, and we all got together, and there has been this constant concern about how the tranches are being paid or the writers are being paid, the credits have been taken away from them. Also now more and more so because the royalties are going to be a real thing with the inception of Screenwriters Royalties Society, which is known as SRAI, Screenwriters Royalties Association of India. So then when royalties will become a reality, the share of the pie that the producers or the other people, other stakeholders will want will also become more and more, stuck. So it's just going to be anyway, it's very difficult. So we are still fighting for something called basic minimum contract, which is still not agreeable to a lot of producers. And all one is asking for is, fundamentally, there should be you must honor the time that the writer is assigning to a project. We often forget that the writer is the first technical person in that sense to be hired for the job, and she's or he's the one who's putting together the roadmap for you, and is the first person who's thrown out of the system as unceremoniously as one can imagine. We all know of writers who've been stonewalled, whose credits have been taken away, who have not been given their media credit, due in the media. I have often said that all these OTT platforms and big studios, when they're making announcements and these posters are coming, why are you not putting the name of the writers on the posters? Who's putting together the project? There would be no film if there was no script. So we are still fighting those very basic battles. And yes, it is. And given the situation, which is slump in the market, uh, the bust of the OTT uh, boom that happened, all of those things are also beginning to impact the livelihood opportunities. And there is this general sense of frustration, resentment, anger, disillusionment all over. So, what can we do? Therefore, becomes important. So, what should be the next step? The next step should be about unifying, like having a unified voice to really push forward some of these concerns that we're facing. And like the famous thing that, screenwriters are now saying that writer baap hota hai. Varun Grover said it. So many other writers are now saying it. That's a fact. It's coming from the germ of the idea is coming from them. Your script is coming from them. Honor that. So and value their work and pay them in a and the younger the writers are, the more I hate to use the word, but junior, they're exploited even more, just as everywhere else. But in screenwriting world, more so because this is all freelance work. There's no stability. There's no medical insurance. There is no social security or any kind of security. There is a lot of just polarization on how we see our own rights within the writing community. So all of those challenges need to be addressed in a more concerted way, which is what Screenwriters Association of India is doing now. And there is this leadership which is constantly asking these questions again and again from the fraternity. So one can only hope that it will all these noises that are being made will result into something substantial.
And as someone who has been a journalist, what do you think about the current state of the profession in the country?
Personally speaking, that is the reason I quit. And yet there is what you guys are doing, what Outlook is doing, what a lot of alternative media organizations are doing, which to keep the hope together and keep the faith on the fourth estate as it is known. But yeah, it's what do you say? My beloved organization that I was once a part of is no longer what it used to be.
And just my last question to you, I mean, after all of this, is there any other profession which is still left that you would want to pursue, or you dream of moving into? Is there something down the line? Or are you really
Yeah.
comfortable with being a screenwriter for now and This is what you want to do, more of this.
No, I actually would want to be a teacher. I
Okay.
would want to be an academic. I would really want to teach.
That's
Someday, I would want to finish my PhD. I mean, do my PhD. I never started it. Do my PhD and teach.
You should. Definitely. You
Thank
have
you,
a lot
Apeksha.
of things to say in your PhD. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well,
Okay, thank
thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you so much, Anu. It was wonderful talking to you. And I hope we meet someday and
Yes,
take these
inshallah, I'm sure.
conversations forward.
Yes,
Thank you
there's so
so
much
much.
work that we have to do as, yeah, as storytellers and writers and journalists and filmmakers.